Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to another episode of Finding Freedom Through Confidence. I am your host, Tanique Easy, speaker, empowerment coach, facilitator, corporate trainer, and facilitator. And here is where we always say you can't pick up confidence from a supermarket shelf because it is an ever growing muscle. Again, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to have you here with us. And this is what I do. I help organizations train and develop their frontline and middle managers by equipping them with mindset strategies so they can reduce turnover, keep teams engaged, and consistently meet business targets. Today, we are going to be talking about the third habit in the series because we've been talking about habits that leaders need to create a team that thinks differently. And we have done so over the last 2 weeks, and this is our third in the series. And so I want to welcome you to this session this morning. And so the habit that we'll be talking about today is the habit number 3: build a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture. So you want to build a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture. And so I have this little story for you because when you build a learn it all culture, this is where great leaders create the conditions for everyone to contribute. That is the hallmark of when you build a know it all culture, not just a culture where it's just the extroverts get to talk, but everyone gets to contribute. And so in 2014, the giant Microsoft within the tech industry had a culture of where it people were being pressured to have all the answers. There was an internal competition, and that led to stalled innovation. That led to missed opportunities because they had a know-it-all culture. That is what they had purported in 2014. But then, the CEO, Satya Nadella, came in with a different mission, a different vision, and turned things right side up. He turned things right side up. He turned culture of Microsoft right side up. And so what that happened was that he started to transform the team from a culture of know it all to learn it all. And so that was quite a mindset and leadership behavior shift that was happening at Microsoft. And so Satya was a super facilitator. And a super facilitator is a coin that was termed by some researchers in a Harvard Business Review session. And so here's the belief of a know-it-all. Here's the belief of the know-it-all leader, that they act like they're the smartest person in the room. They give the directives and they correct others and they create dependency. But that's not the culture. That's not the belief of a learn it all leader. The belief of a learn it all leader is that one, they foster curiosity. They believe in their team's ability to figure things out together. They communicate. Not only do they believe in their team to figure it out together, to solve shared problems, which became the new culture in Microsoft, where what they do is that they not only believe it, but they say it out loud. They communicate this belief out loud, where they let the team members know that I believe in you, and they do it clearly. They say it out loud and they do it with clarity. And so the bottom line is they act as a super facilitator and they draw out the best thinking from everyone in the room. And so the culture within Microsoft shifted from a know it all culture to a learn it all culture where they fostered curiosity. It was all about experimentation. It was all about learning through failure and not feeling like you are stupid when you make a mistake, not feeling judged, not creating that space of judgment. And so these are some example phrases that as a learn it all leader or a super facilitator, here are some phrases that you can hear from them when they are facilitating that culture shift. Uh, I want to pause and I want to, before I tell us that, those examples, good morning and welcome. Welcome, Curtis. Thank you for joining us this morning. And for those who are joining on YouTube, welcome as well. We are happy to have you. Go ahead and share your thoughts as we continue in this series, as we talk about the building a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture in your organization. And so these are some of the phrases that you may hear from a super facilitator. These are phrases that you may hear from a leader who is building a new culture of learn it all. And so you will hear this thing where they may say, you will be asking a question, or you'll be bringing something to the table, and you'll hear them say, that's an interesting perspective. Tell us more about that. Let us know more about that. So they're giving you the permission to experiment, to be curious. Or if the experimentation didn't work according to plan, not that it failed outright, but it didn't work according to plan, you will hear them say, what's one thing that we could try differently here so that we can have a better outcome? Or what did we learn? And that is a shared problem solving. That is shared problem solving. And so as we go along, I want to ask, how many of you have witnessed or you are witnessing, this type of culture within your organization? Have you ever witnessed this? Have this ever happened to you? And so again, what's happening here? Ask great questions. That's what a super facilitator will do. They'll ask a great question. I want to pause again and I want to welcome those who are just joining. Happy to have you this morning with us, Lisa. So great to see you once again. And so the key learning point here, or the key insight here is that in a know-it-all culture, your people are always vying for power. So because of the culture of internal competition, because people are always on the stage, because of that, because people are always pressured to find that they have to have the answer, all the answers, they are always vying for power. So it is the competition, me against you. But however, in the learn it all culture, your people use their time and their minds efficiently by combining their diverse knowledge and their expertise to learn from one another. So this becomes a culture where you have the team working together. They're not just doing it by themselves, but they're coming together. They're using their strength. So everybody's strength is being used. And if one part of the team, if somebody on the team is not so effective in one area, they pull that person up. So you don't feel like you're in competition with your other team members. You don't have to keep looking over your shoulder, right? You don't have to keep looking over your shoulder. And so that's where a learn it all culture, those are the things that happen in a learn it all culture. But I just want to do, let's do a temperature check as we talked about, the learn it all culture and the know it all culture. I want us to do a quick self or a quick leader self-check right here. And I want you to ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself these questions. Like reflect on them. Like, do you feel pressure to have all the answers in front of your team? So as a team lead, as a frontline manager, as a mid-level manager, even as a senior level manager, executive, do you feel pressure to have all the answers in front of your team? Because if you do, then that's not creating a culture. That's not creating a safe culture. That's not creating a culture where people are free to make mistakes. People are free to learn and to be open. Or as a leader, do you stereotype underperformance and imagine that they can't change? Have you, as a leader, experienced that yourself prior to you moving into the capacity that you are? Because it requires the belief. When you believe in, when here's the thing, when you show belief in your team members, even if you think that they're underperforming, when you show them, when you talk with them, when you show them that you believe in their abilities and you believe in their skills, they start performing better. Things start to change. But it requires you as a leader to shift your belief. What do you believe about your leadership capacity? What do you believe about yourself as a leader? And how does that belief transform or transmit to your team? So you want to ask yourself those questions. What do I believe about self as a leader? What are my beliefs? What are the thoughts that are happening in my head? What am I thinking about? And when I say think about I'm talking about your leadership thoughts. Because your thoughts, because the beliefs that you have leads to the thoughts that you have, and the thoughts that you have leads to the action that you take. And so if the belief is a negative one, then the thoughts are going to be negative towards the team members, and then the action will follow. Or you will want to ask yourself, this is a self check. You want to ask yourself, when was the last time you admitted to your team, I don't know, but let's figure it out together? And when you share that with your team, like, I don't know, it's not an indictment on your leadership capacity or your leadership ability. It is not. When you admit to your team that you don't have all the answers, and none of us have all the answers all the time, we need to go to someone else. We need to check in with someone else. Because here's the thing, Lisa is good at teaching about menopause. That's not my strength area. And so if someone is going to ask me about that, I would need to go to Lisa to ask her and to say, I need to learn a little bit more about this, because I'm having some conversations with friends about this. How do I approach? What are some of the things that I can say? Because we don't know. And so you can admit that it's not an indictment on your leadership ability. It's not an indictment that you are not aware, but it shows you that you are open and you are curious to learn. And here's the other thing that I want to check as leaders, that when you go into meetings, do your meetings feel more like a Q&A session with you, or does it feel like a problem solving session with everyone? Because if it feels more like a Q&A session, then your team members are not going to want to participate. They're not going to want to share openly. When it is a problem solving, when it feels like a problem solving session with everyone, then what happens is persons are more willing to be open. They're more willing to be vulnerable. And when we talk about vulnerability in this space, we're not talking about oversharing and dumping, because persons take that too. When you're talking about vulnerability, it is coming like, oh, I need to share everything that's happening in my life. No, there are boundaries. There are personal boundaries and there are professional boundaries. And so when we talk about being vulnerable, it is showing that I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. I'm willing to learn. And team members, they take they gravitate towards that more in a leader, because that leader is showing emotional intelligence. That leader is demonstrating emotional intelligence even in that space and that aspect. And so what I want to, so it's not just the leaders have a self-check. Team, you also have a self-check. You need to check yourself as well. So let's check your temperature. What's your temperature look like? What's your self-check look like as you navigate from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture? And so as a team, as we ask the leaders, do you see yourself? Do you see yourself being pressured to have all the answers? Or, do you admit that you don't know? So now for the team self-check, here's what you're going to ask yourself is, how well does my leader recognize my potential? And it goes back to this leader self-check of, do you stereotype underperformance and imagine that they can't change? So how well does your leader recognize your potential? Because when our leaders recognize our potential, here's the thing, what happens is that persons start to buy into the vision of the organization even more. And because they've been buying into that vision of the organization, as a leader, you start to have a vision for your department, you start to have a vision for your team, and they buy into that, which leads right up into the vision of the organization. And then what did I say? What happens when people have a mindset shift in the teams? What we do here at Dream Builders Global Coaching Solutions, my company, is that not only do they start to have more engagement on the team, but you realize that you start to meet business goals or business targets more consistently. And this reduces turnover. This reduces turnover. And so these are all tied together. So when your leader recognizes your potential, when you as a leader recognize your team members' potential, these are the ripple effects. Do you know where you stand with your leader? What happens in your team when someone makes a mistake? Is it met with curiosity or criticism? Because if it is met with curiosity, people again are willing to be open. They're willing to learn, they're willing to grow, they're willing to experiment and to explore. But if it is met with criticism, people are going to shut down. People are going to shut down. That is what is going to happen. And so if you think about a learn it all culture and a know it all culture in the form of a stage and lab. So let's paint this picture. In a know it all culture, it's every meeting is like you're on the stage, you have to be perfect, you are performing. You are performing and you have to look smart and you have to avoid mistakes. And so you have this performance culture instead of a learning culture. And so that's the picture there. When we think about a know-it-all culture and a learn-it-all culture. In a know-it-all culture, you're on a stage, you're performing. It drains, even it actually drains your energy. because you have to be putting on this mask, putting on this facade. And so it diminishes, or it hides rather, learning. You have a performance culture over a learning culture. And let's not be mistaken, there is a time that there is time and space for that command. When it comes on to, if you know that something needs to get done as a leader, like yesterday, then you're going to have to do command and control. But however, if you know this is for the longer term vision, is you want to build a learn it all culture, not a butt head kind of culture where you have to know this. You have to pretend to know all the answers, and you start competing because it is a stage presence. However, let's talk about now what that looks like in the learn it all culture. Because again, in the know it all culture, you're on stage. In the learn it all culture, you're in a lab. Your learn it all culture is a lab. And this is where people are cultivated. People experiment with things, and they may not get it right the first or the second or the third time, but they keep iterating the good parts of the experiment. They keep iterating to get it right, because the more they iterate, the more they realize, okay, we can tweak this or we can tweak that. And so they co-create solutions. That's what they do in a learn it all culture. That's what they do in a lab. They co-create. And so mistakes aren't seen as failures. Mistakes aren't seen as failures. What they're seen as is data. And they use that data to improve what is it that they're doing, to improve decision making. And this is where we create a psychologically safe environment. This is where persons are not afraid to show that they don't know. This is a culture where people are not afraid to make the mistakes and to learn from it. And so, leaders, you set the tone. You are the person who sets the tone. And your meetings start to become this creative space where belief and ownership grows naturally. And that's what we want. We want belief in self. We want belief in their capabilities to grow, and the ownership, they take accountability. And that's where the performance aspect of even my MVP framework comes in, because when you take that aspect, when you start performing and you take ownership, you are now accountable. You're holding yourself accountable for your growth and your learning and your development, and you're holding yourself accountable for the decisions that are made, and you're not passing the blame. And so the ideas are tested. Here in the lab, ideas are tested and the things are analyzed, and then you realize, so the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is not perfection. The goal in a lab is refinement. The goal is discovery. How well do we discover? And so within that space and context, as a leader, what you do, you start to pull out the quieter voices. And so here's a quote from Kathleen Hogan, Microsoft Chief People Officer. She said that the minute you think you've arrived and have a growth mindset is the minute you have a fixed mindset. And so what happens here is that you keep asking questions. And let us be honest that we all have some amount of fixed mindset. So even though I am growing in my capacity as a leader, as a coach, as a corporate trainer and facilitator, I still have some amount of fixed mindset. Every single one of us have some amount of fixed mindset within us. And that is why we learn, we know what that looks like. And what happens now, we start to use the growth mindset, apply the growth mindset techniques to that area of our lives where we have found that this mindset is fixed and we want to change that, we want to shift that, we want to transform that area. And so we use the growth mindset technique to do that. And so we know that we have not arrived. What we start doing is to know that this is a continuous journey. It is a continuous journey of growth in our leadership abilities and capacities. And we bring our team members along on that journey with us. And so the more we pull that out, the more we will see our people being more cooperative, being more collective. The more we will see that they are being more productive. And because they're being more productive, the bottom line keeps increasing. And so, what does this learn it all culture look like in action? What does it look like in action? Well, here's what it looks like. In the learn it all culture, the super facilitator, that leader, they unlock the collective genius of their team members. And so, what does that do? People learn in that space to, to play with each other's strength. So we learn to play with each other's strength. We don't have to keep looking over our shoulders. We're not competitive. We're not competing against each other. But what we do, we learn to play with each other's strengths. And so we unlock that collective genius, because here's something that I came across recently, is that genius is actually a team sport. More often than not, genius is a team sport. And so when we come together, we have more minds. And when you think about, if you read Think and Grow Rich, and where Napoleon Hill talks about the mastermind, because when you have one mind, when I have only my mind, I am limited in my capacity. But when I come together, with a Curtis, a Lisa, a Dr. Leslie, a Dr. Marcia, and others, we are unlocking our collective geniuses because we are learning to play with each other's strengths. And it's the same thing in your organization. So as a leader, you want to look at how you can unlock the collective genius of your team members. Look at how you can do that. Here's what this looks like in action again. We start to ask better questions. So not only does this super facilitator, not only does this leader ask better questions, but they communicate better. They communicate their belief in their team members, and their team members start to communicate that belief again to the other team members. They start to trust their team members. They start to learn to put trust in each other, because you're now communicating, you're now asking better questions. No question is foolish. And again, this is where the psychological safety comes in, because as a leader, as a super facilitator, you are building that within your team scope. The third part of how this looks in action is that it encourages diverse perspective. It encourages diverse perspective. It's not just one or two persons who are speaking or sharing ideas, but it is that what happens here is that this leader, this super facilitator, they keep the ball moving, they keep the ball rolling, and what they do is that they allow others to share. And it rolls right into you turning your meetings into a lab for discovery. because you bring out the quieter voices, because you know you have, like, I have experience where when I was in corporate, where when you had meetings, you only had like two or three persons, the most, the loudest voices in the room. And because they were the loudest voices in the room, others shrink back. Persons like myself who are natural introverts, we shrink back. Even if we had a good idea, even if we had an idea and we wanted to share it, we shrink back and we didn't say what we wanted to say, because that was a kind of a know it all culture instead of a learn it all culture. And many of us have experienced that, where the extroverts, the two or the three extroverts, take over the entire meeting and no one else gets to say anything, even if they have ideas that they want to share that can make the team work better, make the team work more collective, make the team come together as a better unit so that they can produce even greater results. And so, as a leader, you look at keeping the ball moving. You draw out the quieter voices. You allow persons to speak. You don't just allow one or two persons to, as they would say, to hug the mic. And so, as we wrap up, are you experiencing, or have you experienced either of these two cultures in your space and context? Because truth be told, there are super facilitators among us that we can all identify. But better yet, you and I, if you feel that you are not there yet, you have the ability to become one. You have the ability to develop your emotional intelligence, to communicate more effectively, to build that belief in yourself as a leader, what you think about, the thoughts that you allow to dominate. You have the ability to become a super facilitator. How you shift the mindset and how you shift that and you turn that into belief, not just for self, but for your team members. And so anyone can transform talent into trust and team into something more than just the sum of its parts, because a team is made up of different parts. It's just like a car. Without the engine, the car can't move. The car can't drive like that. And so the team as an engine, and as you create that space, so it's not just parts, but you transform it into something that will move. You transform it into a vehicle that will drive and drive results. And so this happens when we have the correct attitude and we start to put in, or we start to take actions like these. So when we start to have that correct attitude, the shift in the mindset, when we start to believe good things about our own leadership capacity, when we start to build that leadership belief in self, and then extend that out to our team members, we are practicing these essential techniques. And so if this resonated with you today, if this resonated with you any at all today, and you want to join and you want to explore this type of mindset and reframe even more, join me for the Currency of a Growth Mindset workshop. Registration is now open for the Leadership Growth Tour, where we will be diving into the currency of a growth mindset, which is our proprietary framework, our proprietary workshop, where we go deep into the tools and mindset leaders need to transform belief into team performance. So thank you so much for joining me this week. And I am grateful that we got to spend time together to talk about the habits that leaders need to create a culture or to create a team that thinks differently. So I'm looking forward to the other comments and to responding to every single one of them. Again, thank you for joining me, and we will see you next week for another episode of Finding Freedom Through Confidence, where we always say confidence isn't something you pick up from a supermarket shelf, but it is an ever growing muscle. Bye for now.